Welcome to this episode of Crossroad Connection. We're speaking out for those left unheard. My name is Art Van Walde, and I'm the host for this episode. And today I have the privilege of welcoming Theresa Vickers, and she is with Goodwill Industries. So welcome, Theresa.
Thanks, Rob. I'm glad to be here.
And why don't we begin, Theresa, with you talking to us a bit about Goodwill Industries, talking about this organization that you work for. And I understand you are working there over 20 years.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes, and I've seen a lot of changes throughout those 20 years. We've been around since 1902 in Grand Rapids since we're at our 50th anniversary next year, so 50 years now. And what we do is we help people find employment. Everybody seems to know our stores, but those really are there to help us create the funds so that we can run our workforce development programs. And we serve a variety of individuals. Anybody really who needs a job is struggling to find it for whatever reason. So we work with youth transitioning out of high school, people with disabilities, people that are coming back from the military, homeless vets, just people living in poverty, on welfare, or even maybe just somebody who's held the same job for 25 years and has never had to use like a computer-based program or something for job hunting. And you know, one of my favorite populations that we serve that I've gotten very involved in is the re-entering citizens. As when we basically serve most of those folks as they're coming out of prison, so immediately when they get back.
Okay. So 50 years Goodwill Industries has been in Grand Rapids. Out of curiosity, where did Goodwill Industries begin?
Goodwill Industries began in Boston, and it was a Methodist minister who started it. His name is Edgar J. Helms. He wanted to work missionary work in an evangelistic sort of way in India, but because of the economic times, he wasn't able to do that. So he saw a lot of people in need, especially the refugees coming into Boston. So he started a program to not just collect clothing and give it to them, but have them collect clothing. They refurbished it, they sold it, and then they shared the profits. And that's kind of how we were born, is more of a hand up instead of a handout. And we believe in the dignity of work, and if somebody comes to us and says, I want to work, we believe that they can, and that they should be given the opportunity to meet their own basic needs if possible. And what happened with Reverend Helms is other people were seeing this work in his city, so they started starting it in different cities. And so we are one organization, but we are all independent of each other.
Okay.
But we have a national organization in Washington, D.C. that kind of oversees us. And every Goodwill can customize their mission a little bit, depending on the city's needs that they're in. So we all run a little bit independently so that we are meeting the needs of our own communities. So
I like that statement, hand up instead of hand out. And that really speaks to the dignity of helping people to provide for themselves.
Absolutely.
And that leads right into what I would really like us to talk about, and that's about helping those who are re-entering society from prison. And can you talk with me about how Goodwill Industries is helping with this?
Well, we get people when they're coming right out of prison, and it's pretty amazing. It's really, really amazing to see what happens when somebody comes out of prison. If you figure, I mean, just think about yourself 15 years ago. Think about the technology that was available 15 years ago. Did you have a cell phone 15 years ago? Did you, you have a desktop or one of these little pads to,
Yes.
or what did you have 15 years ago? The people coming out of prison haven't seen any of that before, so everything is really mind-boggling to them. They haven't been having to deal with the ins and outs of the daily pressures. They haven't had relationships in a normal way with their family. They haven't had to work in a normal way. They've had all their food provided for them. The bus routes have changed, if they even had bus routes when they, in their areas. They have to find housing, they have to find work, they have to reestablish everything. So they do come out of prison feeling very, very, very overwhelmed. And
There's a term for that we talked about before. It was called collateral consequences.
well, what happens with that is that a lot of times when people come out of prison, they are faced with a lot of different punishments that go on forever. So when somebody is, let's say they were given a sentence for 15 years and that perfectly fit the crime. Everybody agreed that perfectly fit the crime, and that person went in and did their 15 years and did their time. When they came out, what they find out now is now they can't get housing, because even though the landlords have to consider them, they just deny them because there's somebody that doesn't have a criminal record. Or maybe they want to go to their child's school and volunteer. They can't do that. A lot of times they can't do that because their criminal record says they can't do that. They may want to volunteer at the Red Cross. Maybe they've got a background in emergency management or something like that, and they might have a drug charge or something like that. They might not be able to be a volunteer there because a lot of the rules will prevent them from doing that. There's so many of those that it's even hard to keep track, and I can't even give you really specific examples. But every place they turn, they continue to get punished, even though they've done their time and they've paid their debt to society, which makes it even harder. So here they are coming out, and they're faced with all these new, incredibly overwhelming circumstances.
Yes.
Yeah, things that they haven't seen before. They're being reunited with their family who's, they've moved on with their life. And they have to learn to be together again, and that's difficult. And then on top of everything else, they're finding, oh, I can't go live in that apartment because the landlord won't let me move in because of my criminal background, or because it's too close to a school, or, there's a lot of different reasons. So now the housing that they were planning has fallen through, and they don't have a place to live. They may not be able to reintegrate into a lot of the activities that they thought they could because the terms of their parole or because of their crime, they won't allow them to do that. I mean, some of these things make sense. You obviously, if you were convicted of fraud, you might not want to hire that person as your accountant. But sometimes it makes absolutely no sense. If you were convicted of fraud, why can't you go do a field trip with your kid? So, and they're fairly random that way. So we just continue as a society to punish people over and over and over again.
And then, for many of those being released from prison, they have a financial debt they have to pay. And then they have a hard time finding a job.
Absolutely. About 60% of the people that come out of prison have financial debts, either fines that they got while they were in prison or part of their sentencing. I even found out recently that when you get out of prison and you're given a tether, which is a tracking device to kind of find out where you're at, that the prisoner themselves or the parolee themselves has to pay for that, and it's like $11 a day, which is hard to do when you don't have a job. So they are expected very, very quickly to get a job, and obviously they need it, but there are a lot of barriers that they face to finding employment, and that's really what Goodwill does. So we help them kind of navigate all the things that they've got to deal with, but our big job is to find them a job. So,
can you talk to us about some of the examples of what Goodwill Industries does in helping people find jobs?
Yeah, one of the really cool things that Goodwill has the opportunity to do is we actually run the single stream recycling center for the county of Kent, and what we do and what we've proven is that if we pay people on the line versus them using service from the folks that have to pay back some restitution and those kinds of things, but if we pay them, they actually are saving so much stuff from the landfill that it is actually paying, it's actually making sense for us to pay those wages, and they're actually making more money. The Kent County is making more money for us to do that. So we've taken over that entire facility. And what we do is we put people into what we call transitional work experiences. So while this reentering citizen is attending mandatory counseling when they get out and reunifying with their family and trying to find work and doing all the, trying to find a phone, figure out how to use a cell phone and those kinds of things, We get them to work in our recycling center. We pay them minimum wage, and they work there for about 60 to 90 days. And the cool thing about that is that we're able to smooth out any rough edges that might have come out of prison. We're able to really enter into relationship with the individuals, and they start to gain that dignity that work brings. And most of all, I think it gives us confidence, and it gives the employer, the real employer that's coming next, confidence in this person's ability. Nobody wants to be the first person that grabs somebody right out of prison. But if I can say 60 days later, hey, this person's been working for me, he's been on time, he works really hard, he's got a great attitude, he wants to make it, he does not want to go back to a life of crime, they're much more likely to want to hire that person. So that's what we do initially with individuals, but we also work on their resumes, we work on interviewing skills, communication skills, just how to job hunt, because most of that's done on computers these days. And when you're in computer, you don't in the prison, you don't have access to the internet.
Correct.
So and so that's what we do, is we get them going in a lot of those different ways, and then we go and we work with some employers and trying to help get them jobs.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you're doing a lot of mentoring.
Yes, absolutely.
So you are walking alongside, help write a resume, help look for a job,
Yes.
help to understand technology again, helping people to develop positive work habits. That's mentoring.
Yeah, they need somebody on the outside that's going to be willing to accept them for where they're at and where they're going, and not overly judge where they've been.
Now, with Goodwill Industries, any statistics about how, when you walk alongside of someone that has just been released from prison and they go through some of the mentoring that you do for them, and the work that they're doing, their success later on in life?
Yeah, well, actually, the whole state of Michigan, the Michigan Prisoner Reentry, quite a few years ago, it's probably about 10 years ago, and when that first report came back, what we did is we really worked hard on getting people housing, which is really important, and really worked hard on getting people a job. Those were the two main issues that were dealt with in that program. When we were able to do that, we were able to take the recidivism rate, which averaged about 66% in Michigan, about 2/3 of the people that got out of prison ended up back in prison for something. We were able to do that and cut that in half.
Oh, wow.
As a movement in the state, and we continue to see those kind of outcomes that they recidivate at about half of what they would if they didn't get employed.
That's wonderful news to hear. Well, Theresa, we're going to go to break here, and in a few moments we'll come back and we'll continue our conversation. So, audience, thank you for listening, and we'll be back in a few moments to continue talking with Theresa Vickers from Goodwill Industries.
At Crossroad Bible Institute, we are committed to helping people in prison develop relationships with Jesus Christ. By correcting Bible study lessons and writing letters of encouragement, CBI instructors participate in this ministry in a safe and secure way. For more information or to sign up to become a CBI instructor, please visit us at cbi.fm on the web.
Welcome back to this episode of Crossroad Connection. Today we're here with Theresa Vickers from Goodwill Industries. And Theresa, we have been talking about Goodwill Industries and how you help the prisoner reintegrate into society. And I'm wondering, do you have a story that you can tell us about someone who has reintegrated into society by going through Goodwill Industries?
I do. I'm thinking of this one individual. He had a pretty hard upbringing, which is typical of a lot of the people that end up in prison. There was a lot of drugs in the home, a lot of illicit activity, never knew his father, and those kinds of things. He actually landed in prison shortly before his 18th birthday. And his prison sentence was 15 years. He served 15 years in prison. Now, again, if you look at that, that puts him well into his 30s before he gets released.
Yes.
And a lot of things happen in society during that time. But even just think about the difference if you are someone that's over 30, the difference between you at 18 and you at 30 is a lot. So he did his growing up there in prison. While he was in prison, he was had a bad attitude. He kept getting himself in trouble and those kinds of things. But he did have a very supportive family on the outside. And so he would have regular phone calls with his family. And one day, his young niece they had a phone call scheduled. And of course, our person could not meet that phone call because he was in trouble again and had his phone privileges taken away. And the next time that he was able to talk to this niece, the niece said, "Uncle, don't you want to get to know me?" And he realized that he really did want his nieces and nephews and to get to know him, and he wanted to have a relationship with these people that he was going to be rejoining on the outside. And he decided right then and there that he was going to change his behavior, and he worked on that while he was in prison. When he came out to us, he was rearing to go, like most of them. They come out, and I would say, with rare exception, pretty much everybody that comes out, they really do want to take the high road. They really do want to make it.
They have high goals, high expectations, and they don't want to go back to prison. They want to change their lives.
Yes, almost to a T. Everybody wants to do that. There are very few that we find that are, just going right back into crime. And so for me, it kind of feels like it's New Year's resolution day or weeks when you first get them. I want to do this. I want to make my life good this time and whatever. And he was in that place. But he had a lot of barriers to overcome. He had gone into prison at 18. He hadn't finished high school. He had never worked because he went into prison at 18. And all he has ever really knew, even in his growing up life, was insecurity, drug, crime, and those kinds of things. But he was bound and determined. His longtime girlfriend and him ended up expecting twins, and he was going through our recycle center at the time, and then we were able to help him find a job with an employer that was paying over $11 an hour. And he said that all he wanted to do was make sure that he ended up having twin girls, that all he wanted to do was make sure that those two twin girls had a father and that he raised them right. Well, it's been several years since this individual has left our program. We provided formal support to him for a year after that, but he's left our program, and he still comes back and brings the girls in and just kind of is doing great on his job and just really committed to making that big change. But I think it was just really important that before he was totally discouraged, we were able to hook him up with some of the supports and stuff that he needed, and he did great.
So what I'm hearing you say to me is that this gentleman, he came to Goodwill Industries. He was worked with, developed a work ethic, worked on some of the issues he had in his life. Then you helped him find a job with another employer, and he is now a dad, married, and he's going forward with his life.
Absolutely, yes. He's doing great. Doing great. So, and we have a lot of them like this. I mean, most people do not want to go back to prison, and sometimes they're almost forced to do that when we shut every door to housing, or shut every door. Every employer says, "Well, that's great. It's great that someone else hires them, but I'm not hiring them." When we get both the ability to put a roof over your head and the ability to support oneself, and we cut that away from that person, we've cut out their ability to meet their own basic needs and the basic needs of their family. And in those situations, people are desperate, and they will fall back into what they know has worked for them in the past, even if it resulted in a prison sentence before.
Because they need to provide for their basic needs in life.
Right. So it's just really important that people are there supporting these individuals, and really not judging before they know the whole story, or where that person is now in their life, not where that person was. Like our individual, when he was 18, he made some really bad decisions, but he's now a 35-year-old man with kids and a wife, and so he's in a whole different place, and we can't judge him for what he decided to do when he was 18.
Well, speak to us about that, because I believe we are in a society that is quick to judge those who are incarcerated, and especially when they're released. We don't want them as a neighbor. We don't want to work with them. We have all these issues in our society of judging them. Speak to us about that.
Mm-hmm. And this is getting worse. It's getting worse and worse. It used to be if you had an arrest but you weren't convicted, or if you had your record expunged, it would just go underground and nobody would ever see it. But now that we've got the internet and information is so readily available, we can pretty much find information about anybody anywhere, and it never really goes away. And while that can be helpful, and I don't suggest don't use that information, I think it's really important that you look at the whole story and the whole person. You get to know who the person is, what they have to give, where they are in life now, not necessarily where they were in life 15 years ago when they committed their crime. Have they had some kind of rehabilitation or conversion of heart? And I would say most of them do. They don't want to live this life of crime. And also judge it by the nature of the crime and how long ago it was. If you have somebody that's moving in next door to you, and just don't panic immediately. Find out what the conviction was. Find out what he's been doing since he's been out of prison. Just really get to know the person, or at least look at this situation as a whole person and not just the crime that happens to be attached to a person. Same with employment. I think it's definitely true that if somebody was convicted of fraud, you probably are not going to want to put them in your accounting office. But if they maybe had a drug crime and were a really good accountant, that you should probably decide first how good are their accounting skills, and then decide if this person fits into your organization.
Correct.
But if we completely always say, nope, just because they have a felony, we're not going to allow them in that position, we're again cutting them off from their ability to support themselves and their families.
Well, I think about this for all of us in our lives. If we look to the past, we can always zero in on an individual or an organization or a group of people that gave us a chance, or someone that walked alongside of us and mentored us and helped us as we grew. And you're correct, when we're 15 years old, we're vastly different than when we're 30 years old. And we, in our society, we need to give people a break. We need to walk alongside of them. When they make a mistake, give them a second chance. And for some reason today, we're not quick to do that, and that's sad. And especially for those of us who are Christians, we need to walk alongside of those who have made mistakes and say, we will be Christ to you. And what's interesting to me, hearing you talk about Goodwill Industries, started by a Methodist minister over 100 years ago. That's what this organization does. It walks alongside of someone and says, let me be a friend, let me be as Christ to you.
Absolutely, that's what we do.
Okay. Anything you would like to say to our audience before we sign out?
Just that I would just challenge our whole audience that when you are encountering somebody that has a criminal record, please get to know them as a human being. First and foremost, they are human beings. They've made mistakes. Whenever I present in front of an audience, I usually like to start out asking the audience if they've ever done anything that maybe could have landed them in prison. That I don't make them raise their hand, but
most people would raise their hands.
Most people would raise their hands. We've all made mistakes, and some of us have made worse mistakes than others. But we should not be defined forever based on that mistake. There is that chance for people to make huge changes in their lives, and we see it at Goodwill Industries. We see that every day. People are making changes every day and being successful when most people thought they couldn't be. So.
And that's good to hear, because I've done a lot of prison ministry, and I remembering one student I dealt with for years. After he was released, he got a job at a moving company and became very successful working at that moving company. And when we moved back here to Michigan from where we lived before, that moving company was contacted, and I specifically requested that person.
Awesome.
And so he came, he helped pack our house, load the truck, all that good stuff. And when it was all done, he thanked me for walking alongside of him when he was incarcerated. And he was so grateful for this company that gave him a chance, and he was now able to provide for his family and be a productive person in society. And that's what needs to be done. And I want to thank Goodwill Industries for what they're doing, helping those who are released from prison to reintegrate into society.
Well, thank you for acknowledging that.
Okay. Thanks for coming, Theresa. And thank you to all of our audience for listening to this episode of Crossroad Connection. And until next time, may God bless you in your lives. Have a great day.